Okay, so the 70s were a terrible time for US car makers, but Chrysler probably had it the worst, considering they went bankrupt. The oil crisis and tightening government regulations tightened, no pun intended, the metaphorical rope around their necks. Let's dive in. In the late 70s, Chrysler had an absolute car crash on their hands, which they kind of do now, but anyway. Firstly, the types of vehicles they sold were questionable. Big gas-guzzling cars while gas prices were at record highs did not really interest consumers. Also, Chrysler was producing said vehicles on speculation rather than building the orders that were received by dealerships. That sounds like a great idea. And since those dealers had a hard time moving on the company's quote-unquote undesirables, that obviously led to lots of unsold inventory. Within 6 months, the company went from $1.1 billion in working capital to just over $800 million. With that, many credit rating agencies downgraded the company's debt, and in order to avoid bankruptcy, they had to avoid money. So, the history books say they didn't go bankrupt, but facts say otherwise. They renegotiated debts and restructured the organization. You know, kind of like going bankrupt. Its creditors, like those of bankrupt firms, were forced to swallow sizable losses. Due to a clause, aka loophole, in the Chrysler Corporation Loan Guarantee Act of 1979, Chrysler was able to pay off more than $600 million in debts at just 30 cents on the dollar. In addition, the company was allowed to convert nearly $700 million in debts into a special class of preferred stock. Paper relatively worthless in the financial markets because the shares earned no dividends and were to be unredeemable for several years. Oh, and if that weren't bad enough, the Chrysler employees had it worse. They cut 20,000 office workers and laid off an additional 42,600 hourly employees. There were almost no winners at Chrysler during this period. Well, maybe some shareholders possibly sold their shares before they became totally worthless? There was a myth that Chrysler's top management took deep salary cuts until Chrysler's financial problems washed over. The company announced its salary reduction program in 1979, and executive salaries were cut between 2 and 10%. But despite the fact that Chrysler lost nearly $500 million in 1981, the salary reduction program ended that year, and executive salaries were restored to their 1979 level. On top of that, the company made retroactive payments to its executives for about 2/3 of the income they lost while the program was in effect. But guess what? Their hour employees got, yeah, you guessed it, nothing. There were also national security concerns if Chrysler went under. See, back in 1977, Chrysler was awarded the contract to build the M1 Abrams tanks. They built tanks for World War II as well. You can go check out my video on that if you'd like to know more. The fear was that if Chrysler went under, the company's national security would be compromised by the loss of a manufacturer of tanks, trucks, and other vehicles. At the height of the Cold War, it was believed the country had to be ready for anything. Almost 50 years later, and the only model bearing the Chrysler name is their minivan. Anyway. But as with all things, there was a silver lining to this. Through the 60s, consumers began to rightfully shift to more quality-built German and Japanese cars. The bankruptcy of Chrysler, because let's be real, they were bankrupt, was a warning shot to the other US automakers to get their shit together, or it was over for them. The government came to Chrysler's aid, that's happened before, and gave them $1.5 billion to stay afloat. 40 years later, they'd have to borrow even more billions just to stay afloat, and just to get bought out by Fiat years later after receiving that money. You know, I think that money could have been spent better elsewhere. But, again, there's a silver lining to everything, which right now, I don't really know. Dodge fans, is there anything... is there anything good going on with you guys at the moment? I don't know. I don't really keep up like I should. I guess if there is, let me know, but I don't know. Having one nameplate to just Chrysler is, and it's a minivan. That's pretty bad. Anyways, I'll stop ranting. I totally don't hate Chrysler. You know, of course not. Alright, anyways, with that, stay hydrated, take care of yourself and your loved ones, and peace.